Hello, MTI members. Tom Morrison here from the Nashville home office of the Metal Treating Institute. We are so excited today to be talking about one of the largest issues that's going to impact heat treaters in the automotive industry over the next 10 years as it begins to develop, and that is the electrification of the car. So many people said, Tom, when are we going to have someone come on and kind of give us some insight as to what's going to be happening there? Because so much of that will change business models for a commercial heat treater if you're deep into heat treating transmission, gears, whatever parts it is. So we're excited to have that for you today. Real quick, I always remind people on the right of your screen, if you don't, at the bottom, you'll see a little icon that says chat. You click on that, up will pop a chat box. And if you have any questions or comments along the way in this presentation, this interactive discussion, please post them there. Down at the bottom, it says type message here. You can already see I've posted out, hello, MTI members, where are you listening from? Would love to see where people are listening from. And if you have a question or a comment, please post it there, and I'll be monitoring those for John, and we'll comment on those as they go. A couple real quick things that's going on with MTI that is so exciting and important is in 2 weeks, we're going to be having our MTI fall meeting in San Antonio from October 4th to the 6th. Giant discussions on just the labor drought going on, how to automate to get past that labor drought. A lot of things that are roundtable discussions. Then we're going to have a speaker talk on how to break the 2-week curse. None of you have experienced that big person that walks in your office and says, hey, I'm giving my 2-week notice. You can't afford to lose your people because people are leaving their bosses today. They're not leaving their companies. And in the labor drought, if you have no one to replace them, you can't afford to lose them. So great discussion. So if you ever get a chance to go over into a MTI national spring or fall meeting, I highly encourage you to put yourself in the budget and get out there to see that. Lots of great networking and connection on great stuff. The second thing I want to mention to you, going back to what I just talked about, it's been proven today that people don't leave their companies or they leave their job, they leave their boss. And so MTI, to help deal with that, we've got one of the foremost experts on becoming a great leader and manager, Dr. Rick Marks, who teaches part of our Yes Management training program. And we've got a recorded session. His is 12, 20 to 30-minute sessions with PowerPoint handouts, text material, and then test to get that knowledge transfer for you to take and buy. We're having on the printed version, we're having a special for this 12-module package of $500 from October 1st to December 31st. Our goal is to get the right information into your manager's hands so they can learn how to be a great manager. And we're so committed. This stuff is over $1,000 if you purchase anywhere else. With MTI, we're going to give it to you for $500 because we're committed to seeing that your people have great managers who can really dynamically pull them in and get them to want to do the work. So great opportunity there. We'll be sending out some notice of that, so keep in tune there. So now let's get into what we're here to talk about, the electrification of cars. And we have with us today, we're so excited, one of our great members, Michael Muiso, who used to be connected with Magna Powertrain, connected us with John. It's John Zalewski from the eDrive division of Magna Powertrain. John, welcome to MTI's live webcast.
Oh, thanks, Tom. Thank you very much for having me, and welcome and hello to all the members. Just give you a little background. Like Tom said, I was from New Venture Gear and was really, the division was called New Process Gear in Syracuse, New York. I spent probably 27 years there. Pretty large captive heat treatment facility for transmission drivetrain products. And so kind of know this topic a little bit and been involved with some of the things you're going through, dealing with batch furnaces and all case or gas carburization, fields. So,
Well, thanks, John. Glad you're here and taking the time out with us. John and I spoke a little bit before we got on this call, and he was sharing about how they're talking that, we could be in the 15, 16, 17 million cars a year range. And I happen to know I'm a demographer that has spoken at our conference, and this is like really good news for all of you in the automotive world, but he's predicting, given that we have 100+ million people between the ages of 10 and 35, and then you have the large generations after that, when all those people move into the 18 and above primary driving ages, we could see car sales of $20 to $25 million in a year in the coming years, just because of how many people are going to be out there and need transportation. So exciting numbers to get involved with, which makes this topic even more, because the question is, will it be gas powered or electric powered? So John, heat treating plays such a large role in a car, in an automobile, whether truck or light duty truck or car. I mean, so much of transmission and gears and parts of the motor are metal, and they need to be heat treated. So how is electric cars going to really change? And real quick, I know you have some PowerPoint slides that'll really expand on some things. So if you want to go ahead and hit your share screen and you can, for any of those. But how is the electrification of cars going to impact going from gas to electricity?
Yeah, and I think what we'll see here and what I'm going to show you is from the outside, the car won't look much different. But when you get down to the structure of the vehicle, you can see here on the left side, you got a pretty traditional, this is a pickup truck powertrain chassis. You got the engine, transmission, maybe a four-wheel drive will be in the center, and then fuel cell, rear axle, spare tire. For this particular truck, this is the OEM's electrified version. A little bit different. Instead of a leaf spring, they got an independent, you got a rear drive system. You got a lot of batteries here. That's what that big black thing is in the center. And then up front, there'll be a front electric drive. But I think what it really comes down to for, the participants here and even my own company, because we produce a lot of transmissions and everything, is what happens to the transmission. And the transmission goes into a pretty drastic change to where they don't even call it a transmission anymore. They call it a speed reducer. And so, the 8, 6, 9-speed and high point axle type of drivetrain products that we're used to seeing, all of a sudden get transferred into very simple gearboxes. Planetaries, maybe a 2-stage planetary or 2 single-stage planetaries, 4-gear speed reducing gearbox like these 2 here, or a combination where it's a crossover gear with a planetary. So things like that is what changes, and what happens to that whole drivetrain of engine in that. This is now your engine and drivetrain all in one. You have electrical power comes in to the electric motor coils, starts the motion. That gets transferred up to the gears you can see here with the red line into the final drive gear set. And then it goes right back into a differential that we're pretty much used to having with all our front or rear wheel drive transmissions, and then out to the wheels. So a lot more simplified type of product from a gearing shaft standpoint, I'd say.
So let me ask you something, and this transition from gas to just on the sheer inventory of what's inside a car that's being heat treated, is there any gauge of, like, if 100% of you were heat treating 100% of what you're heat treating today, and you take a totally electric car, like what percent of heat treating do you think could be lost in that over time if you took a car to car?
Oh, I would say when you look at how complicated transmissions are today, because we have, in order to improve efficiency, improve gas mileage, lower CO2 within the vehicle, they've used the transmission to become a variator. Now what happens with this, the electric motor is that perfect variator. It can change speed on you, so you only need a small reduction. So now you're into that final drive in one gear set, so you're probably only seeing 50% or less of the current transmission. So you could see a 50 to 60% reduction in the amount of heat treated steel, I'd say.
So we're gonna have to make that up in volume, right? With the 25 million.
Yeah, it's volume or expansion into other areas. The one item that does seem to happen with a lot of these, you tend to see more of these vehicles tend to be not just a single transmission drive. Like today, we have a lot of just front wheel drive transmissions. You tend to see where you'll have 2 of these in the vehicle, and maybe that helps temper some of that reduction in heat treated steel.
Right. Now, so I know there's a lot of factors and influences pushing the electric car, and we're going to talk about some other influences down in a little bit, but I know the government is all about going green. They're all about sustainable energy, sustainable stuff. So how's the government playing a role in pushing the whole electric car?
Yeah. In the way that occurs, and this is from the recent, earlier this summer, Biden administration signing their goal. And it's a goal, I'll say that. It's not defined legislation at this time. That gets put out by the EPA or NISTA or like California Air Research Board. But they have a goal that they're pursuing, and they're going to align legislative requirements underneath that. So I think the thing you have to look at, they are putting out the intent to get there. And then there's the legislative items that will bring that about. And how it looks, just to give you an idea of, from the previous Obama administration, you had this gray dotted line down here. This is where we were. And then when the Trump administration came in, they reduced that to this upper dashed line, dotted line. And you had a California new framework that came in that is in this dark dashed line, a little bit aligned with that, but aligned with the Obama, pushing out more, getting to the level. The new Biden administration line proposal is this black solid line where you can see it picks up where we are today. We're up here. It's going to bring it down to pretty much the California rules, and then look to push it a little beyond that for 2026. So that's when that gets enacted, this is what OEMs have to respond to. It's a CO2 per mile requirement, which equates to how many miles per gallon. And one of the biggest ways for them to get there to meet that is to have zero emission fleet to balance what they sell in non-constrained vehicles. Because when you look at everything, you look from passenger cars to light cars, you can see the passenger car market is going to reduce quite a bit. The light truck is going to reduce not as much as the passenger car. They don't quite hit them as hard, but still going to be quite a bit. And you look at the other regions of the world, they're doing a pretty similar or even faster acceleration on the reduce of carbon. And what this means, just to give you an idea, because everyone's wondering, well, what type of vehicles are this? EPA requirements are centered around what they call under 8,500 GVW vehicle or 6,000 pound curb weight vehicle. So that is pretty much, to give you an idea, any 1,500 or 150 size pickup truck and utility vehicle and below. So that's a pretty good catch of the whole market that's out there. So and they have some different categories of how they classify between a passenger and a light truck and so forth. But I think it's this big box up front here that really gives you an understanding of how much of the market they capture, because they do it based on a weight classification.
Right. So what has been the I guess pushback or accepted? How the car manufacturers all responding to all this?
Well, what they do is some of them have gone in and they've already aligned and pledged to meet the California requirements. And what they do with a lot of this, some of you may have some of the vehicles already. You notice when you come up to a stoplight and you stop, the engine shuts off. So they put in what might be called mild hybrid systems that mitigate the engine running when you're not moving. So-called start-stop systems. And some of the other ones, Ford, F-150 has put in a hybrid version of their pickup truck. Toyota just announced one this week too for their Tundra coming out. General Motors has gone the route of they're going to go electrification. So I see them here in the Michigan area. I'm in the Metro Detroit area. I see the Hummer, new electric utility vehicles driving around. I see some of the Ford Lightning pickup trucks driving around. You see a lot of the other utility vehicles. So they're going to balance because they have a fleet requirement. When, I go back this slide, this is a fleet, so it's over all those vehicles that they have to get to. So they'll balance between, having some electric, some of the manufacturers will have some hybrids, and then there'll be like Toyota has a lot of hybrids, Honda has a lot of hybrids, and then you'll have still your ICE that they may do what we've been seeing. V8s move to V6s, V6s go to 4-cylinder turbos, implementing things that can make them more efficient so that they can meet that requirement. So like I said, it's a requirement based on CO2. It doesn't necessarily banish the of what you read and you see sometimes some states like California are saying by 2050, they will not allow ICE, internal combustion vehicles, to be purchased or sold in their state anymore. You're not seeing that come from the federal government at this time.
So one of our members brings up a good point. So when you look at the cost of manufacturing for an electric car and the cost of manufacturing for an internal combustion engine car, is there a big difference?
There is. It's pretty surprising. The electric cars today cost more. They are bringing the price down, and I like to use this slide to help people get an understanding of, how they work or whatever. To give you an idea, let's talk in power. A gallon of gasoline has 33.7 kilowatt hours of energy in it. Typically, a battery electric car that started about probably 8 years ago when this started had the equivalent battery capacity of 1 gallon of gasoline. Now you're seeing 2 to 3. So a Tesla might have 100 kilowatt hours, or Chevy Volt might have like 90 kilowatt hours, or a Bolt 90 kilowatt hours. And what I do a comparison here is I use a Nissan Leaf to a Nissan Versa. They're pretty similar cars. This one's got 62, so about 2 gallons of gasoline, but this one can hold like 12 gallons of gasoline. MSRP 38,000 versus 17,000 over here approximately. Annual energy consumption. This is done based on using a U.S. government site, based on 15,000 miles of driving and 20% just being stop and go. You would consume about $100 of electricity for that, where you would do $1,250 of gasoline on the other. And you can see there's a difference in range and a difference in refill. But I think the big thing is coming right here in the center, the cost of batteries. Right now, the battery at the pack level is probably averaging about $140 a kilowatt hour, but they're working on lowering that. That is coming down. It used to be much higher. It's coming down. They're trying to get this MSRP for electric vehicles to be at par with a comparable equipped ICE vehicle, but we're not quite there yet, but there are a lot of initiatives and they are making progress in that. So, you may see a whole difference there in that.
So I know when we go to electric, a lot of people talk about infrastructure, but let's talk about raw materials for an electric car. I had someone share with me, he says, Tom, he read an article in the Wall Street Journal that basically talked about just enough raw materials to go electric in terms of, he was saying, I guess there's a lot of copper in an electric vehicle, and he was communicating in the Wall Street Journal article, it said if you just took the small country of Europe that has maybe 8 million cars and all 8 million of them went to electric, it would eat up all the copper raw materials inside of 1 year to get to go. I mean, so does the manufacturers feel like they have enough worldwide raw materials to be able to, think of how many millions of cars will be bought.
Yeah. No, without a doubt. That's one of the big issues that's out there. And it's not just copper for the electric motor. You're talking cobalt, which we might use in some of our steel. Same with nickel. We would use in some of the gear steels. That's out there. Lithium. So there's management that has to be done on all that. And then now with the chip shortage that we're even seeing impact the current vehicles, electric vehicles are very sensitive to that, because that's how you drive the power. The electric motor is what the power electronics. So those are very high performance chip type products that you need. So without a doubt, the supply chain is a concern, I think, to all. And, the amount of reusable materials out there, or recyclable, is going to come up to be in big demand. And I'm not an expert on commodities, so I couldn't tell you when you're going to run out of copper, or if we ever would.
So going back to the cost of manufacturing, and there is a big difference. Any time frame that we see of those maybe being equal at some point, where the cost comes down, where cost of manufacturing for the electric is pretty much equal with the combustion engine?
It's hard to tell. There's a lot of, you just think about it. If you put in a new heat treatment facility, you got a long ways to go on, pushing through steel to get your capital investment recovered. So they're reusing some plants, but there's a lot of infrastructure that's going into it. But they're building new battery plants. They're putting in capital equipment to wind motors because they don't have that today. They're machining blocks and pistons and cranks and cams and assembling it. So there's a lot of investment, and I think volume is the big thing that's going to take into play. And it's hard to understand that. And I think what you have to look at when we get to that, currently there's a convenience factor to people and their transportation. And this is just to give you an idea of, from the ICE standpoint, there's a lot of refueling stations out there. You have over 150,000 refueling stations. And when you look, there's maybe 10 pumps on average at one of those stations. You're talking over 1.5 million refueling stations. And to put 33 kilowatt hours of gasoline into a tank is seconds. That's 1 gallon. You're able to do that in seconds, where it's hours with the electric. They're trying to work on, higher voltage charging and everything, but that's a huge infrastructure that's still got to be rolled out. And you can just look at some of the things here from convenience store and everything. You look at the amount of people that they drive. 91% of people use their cars for commuting to work, how much they buy in fuel a year and everything. So there's a huge cultural shift that has to occur and be accepted. I'll say that.
Yeah, I remember back when Windows and PCs were the thing, and Apple came out and sold a frame of mind. They didn't sell a computer. They sold a cool frame of mind with the iTouch, the iPod, the Mac. If you had a Mac and had the Apple symbol on it, you were cool. It wasn't about buying the computer. You were buying kind of a state of mind, I think, the way every one of their commercials. And I kind of feel like when I talk to especially younger people about, buying an electric car, I know some is like, I paid $1,000 to get on a waiting list to test drive the next Tesla so we can put our down payment and buy it. And so, I kind of sometimes wonder if the electric car manufacturer is going to do the same thing to the combustion engine. They're going to sell a frame of mind and a way of life with that car.
Yeah, and I think that's the case with any new technology. There's always those very early adopters. They're the people that are waiting in that Apple store line to get the next 12 or now 13 Apple phone that comes out. But myself, I personally sit back and wait a little bit, and have a different perspective on, where I put my money and how. So I think, personal choice is going to be a very difficult thing for us to understand.
So one of our members has a pretty interesting question that just popped to me. So he says, I've noticed that leading EV manufacturers like Tesla have been designing products to specifically avoid heat treating in certain assemblies. I believe it will take a long time to eliminate all heat treating by use of different materials like composites and like trucks. Do you believe that this trend will be increasing through the passenger vehicle markets, and by extension, the medium and heavy duty vehicle markets?
Yeah, and I don't really think so. I think some of what Tesla's doing, I mean, I know their transmissions, they're heat treated gears. They there's just too much torque. There's power density and torque, and you need the strength that heat treatment brings to you. And the other thing is that brings strength to metal for heat treatment that's needed is high strength steels, sheet steels or whatever for the bodies, because you have these, everyone wants 5-star crash ratings.
Right.
And, you need that reinforcement that the metal treating industry provides to the steels and the processes to get there. Just raw steel on its own doesn't have the duty cycle length or the strength for high impact loads or to prolong for, I've been involved where I've seen some studies. Some of these cars have gone 400,000 miles. Someone used them in a Tesla fleet, like a Uber between California and Las Vegas, and they were doing 400,000 miles with that vehicle. So, but I've also seen ICE cars go over 300,000 miles, and I know many of people that have trucks that have 250, 275,000 miles and haven't had an issue with them. So
get out to the farms in the Midwest and you'll see some big out there.
Yeah, and it's there's one of the things to look at is like I said, you have, it's a bit of a lifestyle item, but you also have to look at, I've driven many a times from coast to coast in the US. And you go a long ways when you get out in the plains of the Dakotas and Montana and Wyoming, where you're driving a long ways at a pretty high speed too, that it wouldn't last. So, you look at what's going on with the infrastructure, and, the chart on the left here is, this is coming from a US government site, and these are 220 volt and higher charging stations is what I put in there. So there's 43,000 charging stations with 105 outlets. So you look at the previous slide, I had 150,000 service stations with 10 outlets. So that was 1.5 million. So a long ways to go, especially when you consider, most people are looking at a couple hours to get to a full level of charge. And then you have some private industry chargers that are going out there, which is the one on the right, which is Electrify America. That's coming out of the Volkswagen Dieselgate issue. They have to put out so many chargers in North America. But the cost is 3 times the cost you would pay in your home. So it's 43 cents a kilowatt hour.
Right.
Where you might be in Michigan, I'm 17 national average. I used in that study I showed you was 14. So there's also additional cost that comes. So plus you have to wait, if you get to a charging station and let's say it's kind of got a couple cars backed up, you got to wait for the people in front of you. It doesn't move as fast as the Costco, Sam's Club, or the Sunoco station maybe does.
Well, and if you look around at the developments of convenience stores and service stations now, they're not selling just gas, they're selling an experience. I've seen some that you can buy tons of stuff, you can sit and have a meal, you can hang out, you can play video games. I mean, I think their anticipation of this, so you can wait 30 minutes, feed your kids, let them play some video games and hang out and entertain yourself while you're charging up.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that they're hoping to do, and I think it just comes down to the preference of the person. Do they want to do that, and there'll be some people that I think will at sometimes lease, or not lease, but rent a vehicle for those long trips instead.
Right.
Maybe they use their electric vehicle for their round town homes, shorter commutes, or even shorter drives, maybe an hour or two, where they know they can get to an actual destination. They have the charger there. And then, if they had to do a very long family vacation, maybe they go to Hertz or Enterprise or Avis and rent a vehicle for that. So
they're getting really good at it. I know some friends that have Teslas, and it's kind of like you punch in, I'm going from here to Atlanta, Georgia, and it shows you all the charging stations, shows you how much you have and when you need to fill up. I mean, so they're getting really good at coordinating and kind of pre-thinking your trip with you so you don't run out of charge.
No, they do. And that's what people find. You can find the charging stations, and it's just a matter of when you go, if it's a normal time, holiday time, if you'll end up with what they call queuing. If you have a queuing issue where you're going to have to maybe sit in line and wait for someone for some period of time. But that's why they're looking to speed up the charging. And Tesla's really good because they have their own unique charging stations. So they're always at that higher, faster charge rate than some of the other stations.
So 2 things come to mind as we have this discussion at this point. And one of my members, Bill in the Midwest, brought up one of them, but you got batteries. Batteries are going to go dead or go bad. And are there any developments in terms of positive developments on the disposal and reclamation of the lithium batteries, and like what's going to happen with those, other than shooting them out into space on some SpaceX?
Yeah, no, there's people that are going to be recycling, and there's already occurs with current hybrid vehicles that have been around for a long time, Toyota Priuses, Ford Focuses, and so forth. They get remanufactured battery packs. So basically you may have a battery pack that kind of goes down or is not at its full potential. And that goes to a remanufacturer they take it apart, they replace the cells that are really low or dead on potential, and then recycle those. And then they put that pack back out on the market. So, you're not someone that's maybe kept the car a long time and needs a new pack would get a new energy pack. But the one thing to keep in mind, just so you understand, battery packs are treated kind of like catalytic converters. They're emissions items. So you tend to have a requirement from the government that says through 10 years of service, when you get to the end of that 10 years of service, which is a certain amount of charge and discharge of that pack, you still have to have 75% potential charge capacity in that battery pack. So it just doesn't go dead. It's something that is still going to have a good amount of potential. Maybe it's not that long range trip anymore, but if you want to, you could keep using it for around town. But then you also have the opportunity of maybe at some point you could get a remanufactured where they upgraded or replaced the bad cells, and then you're back to a much higher potential energy storage capacity.
Got it. Well, another member just texted me. I'm amazed my members are thinking just how I am. That's how we're in sync with one another. But he just popped in a question that was my second issue to raise. Is the capacity of electricity. I mean, you got California that's doing, I guess, blackouts once a week or whenever, just because they don't have enough energy. And as we keep increasing the housing boom and the demand for energy, what does the capacity issues look like for the future to be able to, take on 6 or 7 million electric cars and 10 million new homes?
Yeah. I wish I could answer that. I've read some of the same things, and I know there's some smart grid work that's being done out there. But yeah, just the raw energy production is going to need to be stepped up, and our cross country transmission lines are going to need to be upgraded. And even within your neighborhood, your neighborhood may not have the transformer that can step down and push that much electricity through into the different homes that may be running that type of charge at one time.
Right.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting I'll say learning curve and upgrade at times, to see what happens. It's a lot of technology out there, I'm sure, can make it happen. Like we know, even in our plants, and we used to get pusher furnaces. We used to push them out on holiday weekends, and then we started putting them into gas suspension modes, and we didn't have to worry about pushing them out, and it was like no problem then. But you figure out a way, and you come up with a solution. And I'm sure if there's a way for someone to make some money on it or to do that service, they're going to figure out a way to do it, and it'll happen. Not so certain that the solar panels are going to yield enough charge to charge someone's vehicle or whatever. And you hear about people plugging in their vehicles to charge their house when they lose power, but then your vehicle doesn't have the power maybe for you to go somewhere unless the power comes back on and you're charging it back up. So
yeah, I guess for me this is one of those elements that you say never, because when you have a government that is so committed to green energy and would love to see 100% electric cars, and they have an unlimited budget to give credits to people who want to create the batteries that can last those lifelong and be put into cars. I just think there's a lot of things playing in the elements of never say never, so there's a lot of push and a lot of money and a lot of effort to make this happen. So you want to be thinking in the future, what happens if it builds steam, which leads us to adoption rates. I mean, what's kind of your comments and flow of how the consumer is going to embrace this? Because there's a lot of factors playing into it: convenience, cost. Can I make it 400 miles on a car? Would I ever get stranded if I did run out of charge? So what's that look like?
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I kind of led into. It's kind of understanding how quickly it's going to come. You have the early adapters. That's the person that has to go buy the 75-inch flat screen TV right away, or the new Apple i13. They have to have it, and they'll be there. But for the most people, they're making some compromise to, I have kids that play, Pop Warner football, and I got to pay for that, or this person's in soccer or taking music lessons or ballet or college. And so they're prioritizing their spending money. And so because of that, traditionally, new technologies take quite a bit to unfold into the household. So it was 30 years. When PCs came out, they were talking about it. But when you look at the smartphones, they were invented in 92 by IBM. The iPhone was released in 2007. And you look at where they are today, it's been, I think, 12 years. And
that is amazing when you say that, John. 14 short years of where we are.
But those were all, when you think about it, they're fairly inexpensive. They're, let's say, $1,000. And for most of us, when we got our first one, it was subsidized by T-Mobile or AT&T or Verizon to get us into their plans, because they were looking at the long-term market share gain and
$1
retention.
Yeah, they're selling for $1 a month.
Yeah, there you go.
Now we're all sucked in.
Yeah, so it didn't cost us a lot, but the vehicles are a little different story. You have to, it's a large charge. And then think of this: how many of us have a charging station in our home? That's where they're counting on most people to do. It's easily probably going to cost about $1,000 to $1,500 for you to bring in an electrician, put a 220 wire from your box into your garage area, and then you buy a little charge port for $500 or $700. So you're in that $1,500 range probably to get that happening. That's some of those added expenses that will deter some people from adopting. So it may be a much longer adoption to occur. And that's why I say cost and convenience are going to play a huge part. If you travel a lot and you're concerned about range, even though you're driving more charging stations, that's one of those convenience things that someone may say, I'm not going to commit quite yet. But then there's a lot of people that don't drive that far, and I could easily use one for my wife and her work and everything, and then just have to be prepared that if we're going two separate ways and a long trip, I have to get her to rent a car, for that trip. So personal choice is going to be a huge factor. I'll say this, a lot of sources out there in the press, on the web. There's a magazine called Charge, very good magazine, but there's a couple websites, Green Car Reports and Inside EVs, I listed here, really track some of the industrial forecast charts that you see here. Right now, California is probably one of the highest. They probably have about 1 million of the 2 million vehicles in the US. And when you look at that here, you can see, this is the current US population of electric vehicles on the road. We're just crossing over 2 million. And the green line is the cumulative of California. They're like half that. Right. So you can just see it's fair weather really helps. And we saw some of this in the Midwest here a couple of years ago when some of the Chevy Bolts came out. They're 200 and I think 36 miles of range. And we had some cold spikes in February or January, and people were seeing about 140 miles, and that's the one thing. Batteries, they like to be cool, but they don't want to be cold, and they don't want to be hot. Right. So, that's where some of your energy gets maybe depleted for range, and is to keep those warm and at the proper operating temperature. So, it's going to be one of those difficult things. So we'll see what happens with adoption rates. But in general, I'll say you got to look at it this way. Tesla's got 3 plants around the world, or 2 operating. Third one's being built in Germany, and actually the 4th is being built in Texas to do the Cybertruck. GM's coming out, Ford's out there, I see theirs, Volkswagen, I see the ID3, ID4s on the road. Audi e-trons, BMW's coming out with one. So it is here. It has arrived, and it is expanding. The regulatory items we talked about, you saw the chart. It's going to get more difficult on the OEMs. The impact, though, as we talked about a little bit, the products aren't as complicated. They're simpler. Tonnage as treated steel in the transmission area is going to go down. Will that cause a consolidation or an opportunity to consolidate in the industry? Will it open opportunities to maybe produce into, as you said, they got to now start putting in new transmission lines, maybe making new energy plants or something that require pumps or drive systems. So maybe instead of a speed reducer for automotive, you look for speed reducers in industrial usage sites and start heat treating gears for something like that. But without a doubt, rate of change is definitely going to be dependent on the consumer, how they pull that on, and watch your neighbors' driveways. That's a good indication. I look, like you said, the young kids, your friends, they talk about it and all that, but it's once you start seeing them start really showing up close to home, it really, becomes an eye opener for you and really gives you an idea. So.
Right. Well, one of the things I started looking when I look at the numbers. So you had a chart there that showed the rate of growth where it would be about 25% in 2030, 25% of the total vehicle market.
Yeah, I think that's the total vehicle market for the U.S. Yes.
Yeah. So that's an interesting thing to look at, because even though that 25% looks like it's growing a lot, if you take in 2030, you're going to have 100% of those people I talked about that are between 10 and 35, all in the driving marketplace. We've got about 3.5 to 4 million people turning 18 the next 10 years. That's 40 million people coming into needing a car predominantly. And then you have about 30 to 40 million people turning 32, which is kind of the first age where they have a child and need to upgrade to an SUV or something. So, as the volume of cars, even though the percentage is going up to 25%, the volume of cars being bought could still sustain this combustion engine, in my opinion, when you just look at numbers, because there'll be so many on the road.
Yeah, in general, a lot of times you see the market tends to grow at 1 to 1.5% yearly. The volume increase.
Right.
Will some of those items maybe drive it up a little bit more, that we get a spike in an area, because of populations and even expanded, opportunity of people to affordability to drive, drives it up. But I think currently the average age of a vehicle on the road is still in that 11 to 12 years.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of vehicles on the road. So when you look at to be able to convert some of those, unless you do a cash for clunkers or whatever, it's going to take a while before the number of vehicles. When you look at it that way, 18 million times 10 years or something like that, you got a lot of 180 million vehicles in the US,
Right.
Just hanging out there
Sure.
before you get into the newer ones. So
has there been any talk about what's the life expectancy of a typical electric car expected to be?
When you look at it from the standpoint of the car, in a way, it's no different than the current car. Your usage and abuse and duty cycle is going to be the same thing. You're going to have seals, bearings, tires, brakes. Maybe brakes not as often as you do, because you can do some regenerative braking. But as long as you don't have an issue where the motors get hot,
right,
they don't tend to break down. You don't get cracks in the insulating material. They should run, but they run on bearings. So at some point, those bearings have a service life that maybe they have to be replaced, or they could, get a spalling. I mean, some of these bearings end up getting ceramic coatings on them because of you're looking for static electricity buildup mitigation.
right.
So that might help keep those longer, but you still have a gearbox with bearings. Same thing. There's a finite life. We don't design forever. We design to some hours of usage or mileages a usage in general. automotive companies do. So I would think it's not much different than today's vehicles.
Right. So a quick question on Magna. So, I mean, I know y'all are serving both sides of the fence. I mean, what kind of conversations are happening as a company with your teams? I mean, you got the e-drive division going, we're going to take over the world, and the combustion engines are like, no, you're not. I mean, what kind of conversations are y'all looking at in the future of this whole element?
Yeah, well, we're we service it all. With the current products, you're seeing a lot of optimization to try to improve efficiency or try to improve some of the cost structures. You are seeing where the OEMs are, they're out there talking about this is the last ICE engine they will ever design from scratch. So they're looking to maintain some of those products for a long time. So there'll be those products will be out there. It'll be, the bread and butter, cash cow kind of items. We have some awards. We actually produce for Volkswagen one of their products. We do that today, and that's in production and in some of their vehicles as a secondary electric drive. And we have some other projects that will be starting in the next few years. So as they come up, there's a lot of discussion, competition. There's a lot of inquiries by the OEMs because they're also looking at, they're a big transmission manufacturer,
right,
especially North America. Most of the OEMs make their own automatic transmissions. So they're trying to understand, do they convert? Do they buy on the outside because of capacity, because of volumes that they see with their vehicles? So there's a lot of that make-buy study and strategy going on. So, we're there to service them. We feel we can be strong. We're developing some of our own technologies, and we're being successful with that in the marketplace. So, we think we're going to be around without a problem, and there's going to be some different applications where we're going to see we're more favorable, cost wise or performance wise than what the OEM maybe can do themselves. So we'll be the supplier of choice at that point.
Awesome. Well, I got one last question to kind of bring it to a close, and this is a good thought for people to be understanding, especially if they do business with federal and state and municipality groups. But typically, cities and municipalities have not unlimited amount of income, but government tends to have money they can spend. Even when they don't have it, they figure out a way to pay for it. So knowing that there's a big push with green initiatives and government really gets behind that, do you perceive that trying to tune in to what the government's doing locally could, and they buy a lot of vehicles for a lot of stuff, you see city governments and municipalities tying into more electric cars than not to support the green industry?
You see that in some places. You already see. I see it with a lot. They've gone on to where they were buying hybrids or whatever. But I was just at a show here in the Metro Detroit area, and the school bus business is going to be a big electric. They're getting a lot of funding from not only just state but federal government, so that helps the school districts.
Sure.
To put that in place. And that's one of the areas you see a lot of electrification. Even the mass transit for municipalities is in the bus area, to mitigate the diesels. For a long time, they've been going to hybrids or maybe even natural gas. And so that's where they get, some funding for the credits, and they put it out there. And that's a pretty strong, robust opportunity. And then the other one is, there are different services branches. They have a lot of people that they have to provide cars for or whatever to get around to service the community, and they'll use hybrids or electrics. And that's one of the things. U.S. Postal Service will launch a hybridized postal delivery vehicle soon. This contract went out to Oshkosh, if I remember right. So
right.
That's going to be a hybrid because they have a long distance between a lot of their stops in some rural areas. So,
John, this has been highly informative. We have covered things from A to Z, and I appreciate you being here today. Members, I hope you gained a lot of this. What I heard from you today was it's not coming tomorrow, it's not coming in the next couple of years, but you better stay on top of it because it's coming. Would that be a good summation?
Yeah, it's coming. It is coming, and it's just a matter of how strong it or how fast it comes on. But we're seeing it. and I think your members are seeing it too. So.
Right. Well, John, thank you so much for being with us today. Members, I think this is where the most powerful thing about becoming a member of MTI and being there is we're going to be right there with you, bringing you this kind of information to help you prepare for the future. And we're excited that you're here today. And stay tuned for October 21st, where we're going to be diving in to the technical standards. We've got a NADCAP meeting coming up in October. And in November, we've got an AMEC committee meeting on the aerospace standards. And we're going to be unpacking all that stuff with our leadership with the Technical Standards Committee. So put October 21st on your calendar. You'll be getting an invite soon. John, thank you very much again. Members, thank you for attending. Y'all have a great rest of the year, and we'll see you in October.
Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you, everyone.